Hey there, folks. This is Joshua Orro, the Mustang Prince from Mustang Prince Orro Reports. Now, this episode is something that I've been planning to do for months now. But I want to be frank with all of you guys watching. I did say a while ago that I'm not like the folks in Hollywood who mostly give the same opinions about certain films that are released in theaters or straight to DVD. However, I'm one of the few movie fans who have different tastes when it comes to certain films, especially the ones that are heavily panned by so many people. Maybe it's because of my autism, or maybe I'm just too optimistic about certain things. Now, so far, I did give my negative feelings about 8 bad films on my blog show. And a few of the folks who influenced my show have seen films that are way worse than the ones I've talked about. I mean, they've been through films like The Last Airbender, Food Fight, The Groovenians, the animated Titanic films, Where the Dead Go to Die, and anything by Video Branquedo. Now, for this new list, I'm going to be counting down 13 of the films that are critically hated by tons of people, but still films that a few others, including myself, might still enjoy. If you guys disagree with my thoughts on them, then it's perfectly fine. We all have different tastes of films, whether good or bad. But I must warn you guys that most of the films I'll be talking about are animated, since I'm not too much of a fan of bad live-action films too much. Also, I'm not going to be listing these films from worst to most worst. No. Instead, I'll be going from recent to oldest. So, for all you guys at home, be sure to get some water or a box of popcorn, for this is my top 13 bad films that I like.
We're making mischief, making mischief, and we're really getting in it. Mischief, we're making mischief, and we're loving every minute.
Out of any non-Disney animated film that was made in the 90s, one stands as my absolute favorite, The Swan Princess. However, I have been hearing that there were some good and bad times for Odette's movies. The good things were that the story was enchanting and had great animation, decent songs, memorable characters, and a clever villain, but the bad thing was that it became a box office bomb, and I feel bad about not seeing it in theaters when I was little. And I didn't see it on DVD until 2004. The movie did manage to get 2 direct-to-video sequels in the 90s, which I felt mixed about, and also during the 2010s, 2 CGI sequels were made as well. Now, since The Swan Princess Christmas is already in my top 25 holiday films, the film I'll be talking about for this spot is its recent release of The Swan Princess, A Royal Family Tale. Now, if you guys have seen my review of this film, then you'll know how I feel about it. But anyway, the reason why I like this movie is because of one special little girl named Elise, who Odette and Derek adopts into their family after losing her father in a terrible fire. Not only did I feel that the idea, should have been done a long time ago, but every time Elise is on screen, I feel a huge tug in my heart, feeling the pain and loss she's been through. Plus, despite the fact that she's silent throughout most of the movie, she's really adorable. I also felt that Odette makes a wonderful mother. Speed, Puffin, and Jean Bob haven't changed too much. I also need to mention that the villain of this film the evil force, aka the Forbidden Arts, does get a lot of build-up in this film. And he's different compared to the other villains like Rothbard, Clavius, or Zelda. Also, the Forbidden Arts is the reason why Elise is an orphan. Another character I found memorable was an old scullion who Odette named Scully. He's the only scullion who believes Odette to be good, when most of the other scullions believe that she was evil, thanks to a fake prophecy that was altered by the Forbidden Arts. He even helps Odette find her daughter, and he even dies a hero's death to defeat the Forbidden Arts. Also, there are 3 songs in a row in this film. Not counting the song at the end credits. One is We Want to Hear From You, which is a happy song to help Elise feel better, and helps her get to know her new family. The second is a villain song called Get the Job Done, which is sung by the Scullions. And the third song is a lullaby called Always With You, which Odette sings to Elise after she wakes up from a nightmare. Hopefully someday, if there's another movie after this, they could give more speaking lines for Elise. But for now, we should be happy that she's Odette's daughter, and she truly makes a great addition to this royal family tale. Now, I have learned that the year 2013 was a very difficult year for certain animated films released in theaters. While I did despise 3 of them, like The Croods, Escape from Planet Earth, and Walking with Dinosaurs, there were a few I found decent. And trust me, deciding a film to put on the spot was a difficult task. That is until one of my subscribers asked me to put Freebirds, which was another film I once blogged. Now, keep in mind that this was the first animated film released in theaters by Real FX, who did give us The Book of Life afterwards. Anyway, the reason why I liked this movie is because I feel that Thanksgiving films aren't getting that many theatrical releases as often as Christmas films. It's kind of like the same feeling I got after seeing Hop. Now, the story might feel like a mix of Back to the Future, Pocahontas, or Stargate, but I found this film to be pretty decent with some humorous jokes and slapstick moments. Even though, the villain, Miles Standish, may not look like the way he looked in history books, but he's still pretty creepy and, threatening in personality. You could say that he's uninteresting, but this is coming from my point of view. However, there are 2 characters who are my favorite in this. First, there's Jake, a red turkey who's, takes the main character Reggie through time to the first Thanksgiving to prevent turkeys from being Thanksgiving food. Now, I find Jake to be pretty cool, tough, and funny, especially when he's competing against Hunter. But on the other hand, he's trying to make up for something he failed at while escaping from a turkey fattening facility. Secondly, there's Jenny, the chief's daughter, and Reggie's love interest, who later becomes chief after her father, played by Keith David, dies in a fire. Now, the reason why I like Jenny is because she's smart, responsible, and cute. Also, she does make sense when she says, "When you spend your life doing nothing, you end up being dumb." Freebirds, a Thanksgiving movie that wasn't a bad start for Real FX. Like the year 2013, the year 2011 was also difficult, but not as bad. There were a few films that were very disappointing, like Mars Needs Moms, and a few films that were okay, like Hop. Also, it was a sequelized year with such films like Kung Fu Panda 2, Cars 2, Happy Feet 2, and Harry Potter 7 Part 2. Anyway, the bad film that I liked from that year was Hoodwink 2, Hood vs. Evil. If you guys aren't familiar with this film, then I'll give you a little recap of the ending of the first film. After Red Riding Hood, her grandmother, Wolf and his squirrel sidekick Twitchy have captured an evil bunny named Boingo, they were hired by Nicky Flippers of the Happily Ever After agency. In this film, Red has joined a sisterhood of kung fu bakers that weren't mentioned in the first film, but anyway, those folks keep a recipe that makes a super truffle that'll make you unstoppable. Unfortunately, the recipe was stolen prior to this film. At the same time, Granny Puckett gets kidnapped by a witch named Verushka, who's teaming up with Hansel and Gretel, who are the real villains of this film. The things I liked about this film is its style of story. Well, while the first film was like an interrogation film, this film was like a secret agent action fantasy comedy. Some scenes do bring back memories from the first film. Also, the CGI animation does look improved. I also like how Big City and Dark Castle Towers looks in this movie. The fight scenes are pretty funny and action-packed. As for the characters, well, in my opinion, Hayden Panettiere does a better voice for Red than Anne Hathaway was. No offense. And also, Granny's relation with Verushka is interesting, and also Wolf and Twitchy are still my favorite characters. And we also get to see Kirk the Woodsman, now voiced by Martin Short, with his happy yodeler friends. Plus, I didn't expect Hansel and Gretel to be the villains. And to me, it's rare for children to be evil in films like this. Hoodwink 2, Hood vs. Evil, where it's not just a fairy tale, it's an adventure. Now this spot is going to go to a film that not only I liked, but also a few of my friends liked as well. That movie is Alpha and Omega. I mean, some folks say it's bad because of its blocky animation, but luckily I'm one of those people who managed to see beyond that. Pretty similar to how I saw the Swan Princess Royal Family Tale from earlier. The reason why I like this film is because wolves are interesting animals next to horses, dinosaurs, dragons, and owls. Its story is pretty similar to Romeo and Juliet, except that no one dies. The story is about Kate, voiced by Hayden Panettiere, who is an alpha wolf and has responsibility and aims to be the new leader of the pack, and Humphrey, voiced by Justin Long, who is an omega wolf, which is actually the fun-loving kind. And according to the film, alphas and omegas cannot mate. Speaking of which, there are some maturity in this film. Anyway, one night, Humphrey and Kate get tranquilized and taken to Idaho to repopulate. They do get some help from a golfing goose and a duck to get back home to Jasper Park, Canada. During their journey, they begin to fall in love with each other. Even Kate's sister Lily, played by Christina Ricci, falls for an alpha wolf from the east named Garth, who's the son of the Eastern Wolf leader Tony, played by the late Dennis Hopper. The scenes that I enjoy in this film mostly involve Humphrey sliding down a hill on a log, dancing, even dressing up in a van. And there's even a scene that involves the two wolves getting attacked by bears, which makes me think of a similar scene from Fox and the Hound. No surprise, since Richard Rich had some involvement with this film. I also need to note that my friend Mandy Ross took me to see this film for my 20th birthday. And my friend Daniel Guzman has made a few YouTube poop videos that spoof this movie, which I highly recommend you guys check out. It may have blocky animation and some mature stuff, but Alpha and Omega is one howling good movie. If you guys thought that Hoodwink 2 would be the only fairy tale parody on this list, then you guys haven't seen nothing yet. At number 9, we have Happily Never After. This film takes place in a world called Fairy Tale Land, where a wizard and his two assistants, Monk and Mambo, played by Wallace Shawn and Andy Dick, are in charge of keeping every fairy tale in balance, using a scale of good and evil so that they stay happy. However, Mambo is bored with the stories going the same each time and wants to mix it up in a little bit. However, their job does attract the attention of a power-hungry stepmother named Frida, voiced by Sigourney Weaver, and she plans to cast a happily never after on the entire kingdom. Now, in my opinion, this film does seem to have some creative ideas. I mean, how would you feel if you were tired of hearing the same story tons of times, huh? I mean, you think it could be a scam. I mean, the animation is okay, and a few of the jokes are funny. As for the characters, well, in my opinion, Monk and Mambo are the funniest characters in this film. And I'm also surprised that Sarah Michelle Gellar and her husband Freddie Prinze Jr. got to be in this film together. And their characters, the lovely maid Ella and the kitchen boy Rick, in my opinion, make a great team together. Another group of characters I find memorable in this film was Rumpelstiltskin, who serves as Frida's sidekick while raising a baby that he stole, and the seven dwarfs who have a machine that can shoot diamonds at the fairy tale villains. With a film like this, I'm glad this movie didn't give us a happily never after. Now, the year 2005 was one of my favorite years of growing up as a kid. Not only was it the year I left junior high and moved on to high school, but it was also the year I started acting at Musical Theater Village. Plus, there were some great films that were being released during that time, like Madagascar, Racing Stripes, Robots, and so on. And while Chicken Little is a bad film that I like too, it unfortunately isn't on the list. So, what am I going to put on here instead? Well, this spot is going to Son of a Mask. Now, for those who aren't familiar with The Mask, it came from a film that starred one of my favorite comedians, Jim Carrey, who played a young cartoon-loving banker named Stanley Ipkiss, who finds the mask one night and puts it on and uses it to pull off some crazy hijinks to impress a pretty girl named Tina. And in my opinion, this was one of the funniest teen comedies I ever saw Jim Carrey in. It even got its own animated series afterwards, but back onto the main subject. Now, you could say that this film, well, the downfalls in this film are that none of the original characters are in this film, and the jokes aren't as funny. That may be true, but here's my thoughts on it. In the beginning of the movie, it does explain, well, about Odin and where the mask came from. It was said to be created by a crazy, mischievous god named Loki, played by Alan Cumming. Speaking of which, Loki makes a very smart, funny, and mischievous villain, and his purpose is to find his mask before his father gets more angry with him. Also, the film centers around a married animator named Tim Avery, played by Jamie Kennedy, who wants to make his own cartoon show, and his wife wants to have a baby. After their baby, Alvy, is born, things get crazy for Tim. Well, because of the stress of being a father, while his son, who was born to the mask, tries to lure Tim into a nervous breakdown. Sometimes whenever I watch this film, I get a little Tom and Jerry vibe from all the crazy hijinks that happen. My favorite scenes is the dance that the masked Tim does during the Halloween party. Plus, I also found it clever that they named their dog Otis, since Milo was the dog from the first film. And in my opinion, Otis is my favorite character, especially when he wears the mask and tries to get rid of Alvy. But while the film goes on, Tim does improve on being a father, and his relation with his son grows. With his mischievous hijinks and somewhat hilarious jokes, even a Son of the Mask can help a father become a better person. Now, here's where we come to a year that was a tad mixed for me. I mean, sure, I got myself a new cousin during that year, but it was still a hard year, not only for getting through my first year of junior high school, but it was also a hard time for my heroes at Walt Disney Animation, thanks to Home on the Range. Because of this film's bombing at the box office, the result was that Disney decided to never do hand-drawn animation again. That is until a little bit of Enchanted and The Princess and the Frog, along with the 2011 Winnie the Pooh movie. But back on to the main subject. Not too long after a cow named Maggie, voiced by Roseanne Barr, is taken into a farm called Patch of Heaven, the sheriff tells Pearl that she has 3 days to pay off $750, otherwise her farm will be auctioned. So Maggie teams up with 2 other cows, Mrs. Calloway and Grace, to find a way to get enough money to save their home. While on their journey, they discover that the best option is to catch an evil cow rustler named Alameda Slim to pay with the reward money. Now, the things I like about this film are a few of the songs, which were written by the legendary Alan Menken, who played a big part in the Disney Renaissance. There are also a few characters I love, like Grace, voiced by Jennifer Tilly, who is not only friendly and perky, but she's also tone deaf. There's also Lucky Jack, a wild old jackrabbit, who's a decent supporting character, and Buck, not only because that he's a horse, but because he wants to fight bad guys and take names, even in his sleep. Also in my eyes, Alameda Slim, voiced by Randy Quaid, is an underrated Disney villain. His hypnotic yodeling villain song may be fun to listen to, but it's kind of has messed up visuals. But while he is a cattle rustler, his plan is to take over the territory by buying out all the ranches and farms that are on auction. This film does have some hilarious fight and chase scenes in it too. It did manage to put hand-drawn animation in a long hiatus, but Home on the Range is still the wildest animated Disney movie in the wilderness. Now, I said before on my show that Dr. Seuss is one of my favorite, my childhood favorite authors. I also enjoyed some of the animated specials and films based on his stories, like The Grinch and The Lorax, but I'm still shocked that in 2003, a live-action film based on one of his beginner books got a lot of hatred, but thankfully not from me. And that movie is The Cat in the Hat. Because of this film's reception, Dr. Seuss's widow, Audrey Geisel, banned all of her husband's books from live action. Anyway, the thing I like about this film is its story expansion. And if you guys have heard have seen my Mars Needs Moms blog from a few months ago, I did say that Cat in the Hat was handled better. Now, I know some folks have pointed out that there are some sex and adult humor here, but it's not as bad as some of the other adult-rated comedies that I've seen after this, and thank God this is not an adult-rated one. In my eyes, Mike Myers is really hilarious as the cat, especially when he laughs at his own jokes, which is something my friend Scott likes to do a lot. Also, the 2 songs that the cat sings are really enjoyable. I also like how the movie gives some character values to Conrad, played by Spencer Breslin, who's a rule breaker, and his sister Sally, played by Dakota Fanning, who's a control freak. There's also a plot that involves the kid's dog running away loose with a crab lock on its collar, and that the box that Thing 1 and Thing 2 come from serves as an important plot point. According to the cat, the box is a trans-dimensional portal that leads to the cat's world, and if it's kept open for too long, it creates the mother of all messes. Also, there's a slouch man named Larry, played by Alec Baldwin, who's the movie's villain. Not only does he want to marry the kid's mother, Joan, but he also wants to send Conrad away to the military academy. Huh, I guess he must have met General Genghis Khan Schmitz from Seussical. Also, thank God my autism keeps me safe from ever being in the military, or even being drafted. I also like the elephant wrestling scene in the couch, the cupcake cooking show scene, and also the cat's car known as the super luxurious omnidirectional whatchamajigger, or SLOW for short. Makes me want to call my future car the mighty underrated speedy, tough, and nifty Gadget, or Mustang for short. This movie may have been the last live-action Seuss film, but the Cat in the Hat really knew how to have fun in this. The year 2002 was another one of my favorite years for films, because during that year, I considered one part of it to be the summer of cartoon movies. In other words, films based on cartoon shows were being released in theaters, like the Powerpuff Girls movie, Hey Arnold the movie, and of course the live-action Scooby-Doo film, which happens to be the number 5 spot. Now, I loved watching Scooby-Doo a lot as a kid, mostly because it was funny, and I considered Scooby one of the most memorable talking cartoon dogs next to Mr. Peabody and Astro from the Jetsons. You guys may have already heard my thoughts on Monsters Unleashed on my top 25 Halloween films, but it's time for me to explain my thoughts on this film. Now, 2 years after Mystery Inc. breaks up, they are invited to an island theme park called Spooky Island to solve a mystery revolving around the weird behaviors of some of the visitors. Now, while I do despise the 2 live-action prequel films, well, that came after Monsters Unleashed, the things I do enjoy about this film is its humor, mostly the jokes that come from Shaggy and Scooby. Speaking of which, Matthew Lillard does a great job being Shaggy, and I think Casey Kasem would have been proud of him. Also, like Happily Never After from earlier, Freddie Prinze Jr. and Sarah Michelle Gellar are cast in this together as Fred and Daphne. Oh, and keep in mind, folks, that this was before they got married. Speaking of Daphne, her martial arts are so kick-ass, especially when using them against an evil masked wrestler named Zarkos. Plus, I also like how Spooky Island looks, and according to Emil Montevarius, some of the attractions do seem to poke fun at the attractions from Disneyland. Plus, Shaggy and Velma do get to make new friends while on the island. Also, some parts of the movie made me think of the Zombie Island movie, mostly because of the monsters who possess a person's body, and their weakness is sunlight. But what was really shocking was that Scooby's nephew, Scrappy-Doo, was the real villain, and even though I didn't get annoyed with him in the show, I was just surprised to see him as a gutsy puppy turned evil, power-hungry monster dog. With a film with great humor and a spooky mystery, it makes me want to give Scooby-Doo a Scooby snack. Now, here's where I really need to be frank here. While most cartoons I watched when I was a little boy were on such great channels at the time, there was like Disney Channel, Nickelodeon, even Cartoon Network. But as I got older, I've been learning about other cartoons that I never got around to watching. One example of a show that I didn't watch when I was young was Inspector Gadget, because I didn't know about it until I saw a live-action film of the same name, which was released by Disney in 1999. Now, this film I liked due to the fact that it's about a half-human, half-robot cop fighting crime with cool gadgets. It even has a great theme song at the intro. But nowadays, I start to get the feeling that this film is like a little mix of the Pink Panther, with a smidge of RoboCop. But that doesn't mean I hate this movie. I still think it's a pretty cool one. There are also tons of hilarious moments that involve crazy sound effects, even some funny crime-fighting scenes, like when Gadget stops two robbers from stealing a car, or even the scene where Gadget fights an evil Robo-Gadget, or even the scene where Gadget activates Oil Slick, which is actually toothpaste. That always cracks me up. Also, in my eyes, even if the folks say that Matthew Broderick wasn't the best choice to play Gadget, I still say he did pull it off pretty good, and Rupert Everett makes a sinister and clever Dr. Claw. But the characters I find the most memorable is Penny, along with her dog Brain, and of course the Gadget-mobile, played by D.L. Hewley. Inspector Gadget, go go Gadget, wowzer. While The Three Caballeros was the first sequel made by Walt Disney Animation Studios, it wouldn't be until 4 years after The Rescuers Down Under when the first direct-to-video sequel would be released by Walt Disney Television Animation. And it stars a Disney villain who became my vizier and my enemy at Musical Theater Village in early 2013.
Give me the magic lamp, Aladdin. And now, street rats, I bid you farewell. Crush those urchins.
Yep, you guessed it. The number 3 spot goes to The Return of Jafar. This film did get a lot of negativity due to some low-graded Saturday morning cartoon animation and a few random plot holes, but it did manage to receive a 2 thumbs up from Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert. God bless those guys. Anyway, in this film, Jafar gets released from his lamp thanks to the greedy thief Abbas Mal, and vows to get revenge on Aladdin and his friends. While doing so, he uses Iago to do his bidding and lure Aladdin into a trap. Now, everyone knows Jafar is a great Disney villain, and in this film, he's no different. I mean, sure, he's a genie in this, but he can do more than what he did in Aladdin. But for details on that, I'll have to save that for another time when I do a blog on it. Anyway, he's still clever when it comes to plotting against his enemies. Not only does Jafar capture all of Aladdin's friends and ambush him by a waterfall, but he also gives the guards a reason to execute Aladdin. And I think Jafar's villain song, You're Only Second Rate, is pretty better than the Prince Ali reprise from the first film, even though I wished he could have sang Why Me, but anyway. I also like how Iago manages to change his behavior and join the good guy's side, even as Jafar manages to use him to betray Aladdin. Also, while I do miss Robin Williams these days, in my opinion, Dan Castellaneta does a pretty good job as the genie. But trust me, no one can ever top Robin Williams as long as we keep him in our memories. Another reason for me to like this film, other than its purpose to kick off the animated TV series on the Disney Channel, is the plot of this film became a level in Kingdom Hearts 2, with a few brief changes. With this film being the first direct-to-video Disney sequel, this does show how much of a badass Jafar can be. Now, remember when I blogged The Princess and the Goblin last year? Well, while watching the opening trailers on that VHS, it did manage to introduce me to films like Savage Land, Little Nemo, Adventures in Slumberland, and of course, The Magic Voyage, which happens to be the number 2 spot. Now, I've been hearing that this film does have some animation goofs, and there are times when the characters are still talking even when their mouths aren't moving. Anyway, this film takes place back in 1492, back when people thought the world was flat. It's a story about an Italian navigator named Christopher Columbus, voiced by the late, great Dom DeLuise, who in this film thought the Earth was square, then later with the help from a little woodworm named Pico, theorizes that the world could be round. He then pays a visit to Queen Isabella of Spain to get the Nina, Pinta, and the Santa Maria to sail west to prove that his theory could be correct. Before Columbus sets sail, Pico meets a firefly princess named Marilyn, voiced by Irene Cara, who is kept hostage and taken across the Atlantic Ocean by an evil swarm lord. It's like mixed with a bunch of locusts and bees. There are also a few scenes I like in this film, like the part when Pico makes the inside of Columbus's globe homey. And also there are two dream sequences that are enjoyable, like Columbus's dream, which is pretty hilarious, and Pico's dream, which is pretty romantic. I also like the scene where Columbus uses a golden idol to squish the swarm lord. Now, while most of the songs were okay, my favorite song was The Life of the Sea, where Columbus sings about famous people who sailed in the past. Other than the Swarm Lord being a memorable villain for being intimidating, there are also characters like 3 hungry rats and a seagull who I find pretty funny. The Magic Voyage, a magical adventure on the high seas. Now before we move on to the oldest bad film that I like to make a few honorable mentions. Now, believe me when I say that putting this list together wasn't easy. And trust me when I say that there's actually more than 13 bad films that I still enjoy. But sadly, I couldn't fit all of them. So, for this spot, I'm going to say a little bit about 5 bad films that I like that didn't make the list. Legends of Oz, because it's from a book series that was written by L. Frank Baum's great-grandson, it's filled with a memorable cast and interesting new characters, a villain who's both silly and threatening, and filled with wonderful songs written by Bryan Adams. Cars 2, because the action and humor scenes were a little better than in the first Cars film. Plus, well, my family is obsessed with certain vehicle models, including my friends. I also like the certain locations that McQueen and Mater go to, like Tokyo, Japan, Paris, France, Porto Corsa, Italy, and London, England. And lastly, Michael Caine as Finn McMissile kicks ass. Rockadoodle, because I had to put a 90s Don Bluth film somewhere on the list. Anyway, I like this film for having the late Phil Harris as a dog who can't tie his shoes. A few of the songs have a certain Elvis style to it. And, like Alpha and Omega from earlier, my friend Daniel has made a few YouTube poops spoofing this film as well. And lastly, Snipes, the magpie in this film, always cracks me up. The King and I film from 1999, because a lot of the songs seem to match its stage predecessor, its animation seems nice, and its characters are still memorable, including its villain, even a few animal sidekicks I like as well. And Chicken Little for being a hilarious comedy with a sci-fi plot, and also a great baseball game. And it even gave Square Enix to add him in Kingdom Hearts 2 as a summoned ally. These films may have missed a spot on the list, but they did deserve a mention anyway. Now, ever since I started this whole thing, I feared for the moment that I would ever talk about it, because ever since 2011, I've been hearing complaints from so many people at school or online, and I've been afraid of what folks might think of me if I ever said anything positive about it. But let's just cut to the chase. Okay, here it goes. Ladies and gentlemen, the number one bad film that I like is Tom and Jerry the movie. Now, first of all, I need to say that, like Scooby-Doo, I loved watching Tom and Jerry as a kid. They always made me laugh, and no matter what tricks or traps Tom would put Jerry through, it would always result in hilarious hijinks. But back onto the main subject. After their home is torn down, Tom and Jerry are left on the streets to fend for themselves until they meet a little girl named Robin Starling, a daughter of a billionaire, Robin is being tortured by a greedy woman named Pristine Fig, her dog Ferdinand, and her lawyer Lickboot. Later, Tom and Jerry are invited to stay at Robin's mansion, but Fig decides to get rid of them after they overheard that Robin's father is alive in Tibet. The thing that I find interesting about this film is that unlike the cartoon show, Tom and Jerry are voiced by Richard Kind and Dana Hill, which in my opinion is kind of a nice idea for one time in a movie starring this duo. Even though I still have kind of mixed feelings about the other full-length films that happened later on, including the Wizard of Oz crossover, this film does seem to have some funny moments. Mostly they come from Tom when he screams. There's also some touching moments because my favorite character in this film just happens to be Robin. I don't know, I guess my heart gets tugged by little girl characters. And say what you will about the songs in this film, because in my opinion, most of them are okay, like Fig and Lickboot's villain song, Money, is such a beautiful word, or God's Little Creature, sung by Dr. Applecheek, and Friends to the End, sung by Tom, Jerry, and their new friends Frankie and Pugsy. Plus, Robin's song, Do I Miss You, makes me shed a tear. But only two of the songs I feel are unnecessary, like Captain Kitty's song and that Gangster Cat song. Also in my eyes, the scene that involves a fire at Robin's cabin is really suspenseful. With all that said, I will do everything in my power to protect this movie from any hater, because this is still a childhood favorite of mine. Tom and Jerry the movie, the number one bad film that I like. And that concludes my top 13 bad films that I like. Now, it's true that the critics in Hollywood, Rotten Tomatoes, or online have every right to decide if a film is bad or good. But keep in mind that there are still many other folks out there who still might enjoy them, including me. So be sure to join me for my next blog. Mustang Power. So, it's over. There's been so much positivity coming from that point of view of that Mustang. I guess there isn't a way to stop him. I'm now starting to understand that the Mustang Prince is entitled to his own point of view on whatever film he talks about. I don't think there's any reason for me to exist anymore. But if I die, where will I go? I guess I'll never know. Farewell.